Hello and welcome to the next edition of the Hack the Planet podcast. We're doing a special episode all about DMA, or direct memory access. And unfortunately, there is nothing funny about DMA. So we've been gathered here today under special circumstances. We have Mitchell and Max. And Mitchell has a bee in his bonnet on the subject of DMA because apparently he has been reading the Twitters. So Mitchell, can you tell us what is going on?
I wasn't going to try and implicate any social media site in particular, but yeah, the Twitter.
Well, I need an interpreter, like for tea leaves, to interpret the Twitters for me.
Okay,
and tell me what they foretell.
Yes, no, this is a seance. I am your medium.
The shitpost that is the collective infosec Twitter.
Really, all I can tell you of the world is that I just got the golden watering can. So
I don't know.
5-star island people, yeah.
Oh, okay. It's the Animal Crossing thing.
Sorry, carry on. So, pray tell, what of DMA on the Twitters, Mitchell?
Oh, well. I mean, we have a lot, but maybe before we get into that, we can sort of start off on a lighter tone. I know we've all had some stuff we've been working on.
Yeah, actually. Okay. So we'll get into DMA in a minute. I guess we can go around the table and do a little show and tell about our project. So who wants to go first? You want to talk about your side project, Mitchell? Or
sure.
I heard that the Hack the Planet folding at home team is or at one point was ahead of the Air Force.
Well, it's like it's hard to rank these things because it's like there's points per week versus like points total, and there's all of these other sort of variables you can rank yourself on, and like how much you've changed recently in terms of rankings. But there is a very fun site, which we might have talked about a little earlier, but it's folding.extremeoverclocking.com, and it keeps track of all of the top folding at home teams. And I've been having a little fun trying to play around with how high can we get the Hack the Planet podcast team up the ranking.
Not the usual way that you try and get the never mind.
So you went like super weird deep on this.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us the whole narrative, like each step, each turtle down, so to speak.
So
how did you get started on this?
Well, the first thing I've always been concerned about is that you apply your thermal paste in a way that's shitty, and you're like, do I want to replace the thermal paste on this or not? Because that's like not a lot of effort. Like it's a decent amount of effort to do. You unscrew the screws, and then like you take it off and do it. I might have even done it once at this point. I don't know, but I have a thread ripper. So did you have a question?
It's not that big of a deal as long as you get the Hellman's bulk thermal paste.
I find it stressful. Anytime you have to reapply the thermal paste, you have to get the old thermal paste off without doing anything weird with it, and then it's like you got to spread it evenly, and
there's so many fucking
it's like getting film
developed.
developed. When you finally squish it down at the end, you can't see what happened.
And it's like all like I have
depends on where you apply the thermal paste, right?
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
Thermal paste can cause anxiety.
Wow. All right. So the point is, I wanted to know whether or not it was faster or hotter for me to run it with the side of my case on or the side of the case off. That's all I've been wanting to know for a while, because I have an air cooler and there's a lot of different variables that go into this. Because there's also a big ass fucking video card on it. I just went all out on that because I'd never done it before and thought, what the hell, I'll try it. And it puts out a lot of heat. And so I figured this
is one of those long running debates, that has been going on for decades. Like, do you get better airflow with the case closed or open?
Right. And I just wanted to know and get it over with. But the thing is that with folding at home, at the peak, if it's just like everything, the stars align, everything gets scheduled just right, you can turn on a lot of draw, but then it just filters back down, and it's hard to filter out whether or not it's you putting the case on or off that makes the temperature go up and down, or if it's actually the folding behavior that's going on and off. And there were so many variables, like what if there's so many auto settings in the BIOS that could be like fucking around with the voltage randomly.
I mean, they do have benchmarking utilities out there.
Right, but it's Twitter, and not Twitter, it's Linux, and I was doing this all over SSH, and it's like,
fair,
I don't want to use those. And I used one, but it didn't seem good enough. So anyway, what have I done? Number one, you want your whatever core, there's one thread dedicated to your GPU if you're doing folding at home, and you want that one pinned. And if you have like a processor with hyperthreading or SMT, you want both threads to be empty until you schedule the GPU thread on that. And that way, that one specific core will be running at peak capacity to move stuff around your different CUDA cores on your GPU. And that does affect how fast you can fold on your GPU. And that's like the number one trick to boost points by like a decent amount.
How did you get there from looking at the case temperature or whatever?
Well, so that's a good question. At that point, I was like, at one time, I was trying to use Rosetta at home, which I'm not even just messing around with anymore. So I won't say any more about that the rest of the time. But also, while I was doing that, I was trying to sort of optimize, like, how much can you sort of like do at the same time. So I actually at one point stopped caring about the temperature and started caring about the points per day. And at the end, I'll go back to the temperature.
Burn, baby, burn.
Yeah. So at some point I was like, I'd played around with it enough to where I realized like if it gets to 83 degrees or 84 degrees every once in a while, that it's probably not going to explode and never work again. Like it's a little warm, but I'm not going to die. So I figured, like, okay, how do we just maximize temperature out of this?
I mean,
so
the real thing is too, if you start getting concerned about the temperature because you're maximally utilizing your card, then you probably just should get liquid cooling because like they make.
Well, yeah. So yeah, I've been looking at liquid coolers. I'm probably going to buy one this weekend.
You can buy one of the new all-in-one ones, or
right? I don't know. I've got to look at it, but it comes like my Threadripper. It's a 12-core, 24-thread Threadripper 1920X, and it does. I don't know. It's the first version of AMD's new Zen microarchitecture, where there was like tried to balance between like integer and floating point, and like a bunch of other different things. And it's like, I don't know. There's like a philosophy behind how they designed the microarchitecture or whatever, and I've been trying to like basically maximize floating point performance because that's what you do with folding at home. So first step, your GPU has like a bunch of CUDA cores, which is it can do floating point operations. That's cool. You give it that thread, flops. You schedule it correctly, and then it'll just fly. And so that's where you get the bulk of your points. And then the next question is, how do you get points off CPU units? And so been like iterating over you. One of the things you do, again, the same way that there is with the GPU unit, you don't want to try and have two threads at the same time on one physical core, because there will be contention, probably like in the floating point unit somewhere, that just slows you down a little bit. So that's just one of the things I learned. You don't actually have to turn off symmetric multi-threading to do this, like to force it. There's a bunch of ways in Linux that you can do this. I have a bash script to do this. It's on GitHub. I might link it in the show notes. It'll show you. It basically does all the pinning. I'll probably do a blog post on how to like describing all this. Wouldn't talk about it here, but those two things, and then finally, if you run strace on the processes, like the CPU folding processes, what you see is a bunch of calls to the syscall like schedule yield. And what that does is it basically says, I'm going to take a break for a bit. I'm going to give it back to the kernel. Kernel, do what you want. Schedule something. I'm going to be chill here. Just sleep for a bit. I'll be here when you wake me up. And those messages, they take a little bit of time to just like execute on the core. And so one thing you can do is that the fact that the folding library calls this through libc, you can actually just hook into libc before it ever gets to the kernel. and you basically just always return 0. And if you get it pinned correctly, and then you do that, you really actually, basically, you're spinning on a bunch of threads waiting after. So you turn it from a schedule yield into like just sort of like a sit and spin lock. That's actually a spin lock.
So you're
But you can't really do a ton.
You're bypassing kernel scheduling at that point, like completely in New Zealand.
Yes,
he's avoiding triggering it. Yeah. So
Yes.
basically,
That's awesome.
it's a two-part solution. He's got this bash script that we will link that he put on GitHub that goes through all of the folding at home processes and makes sure that there's one per core, because he has this Threadripper that's got like 24 cores or something obscene. Right. So that's the first step. So it's one process per core. And then now that you know that that's true, you can circumvent the thread scheduling stuff because you don't.
You just echo the right places in sysfs, and you can just say like turn off like different parts of the scheduler. Like there's like a tick too, like a scheduler tick you can just turn off.
I've done that before with virtual.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It's one of those things that if you're doing gaming on a like with a PCI pass through, because gaming on Linux, it's always the year of Linux.
Oh, PCI pass through. That's foreshadowing.
It's the DMA. Yeah, but it's just one of the tricks they use is scheduling the basically taking CPUs out of the kernel scheduler.
Yeah, no, exactly.
For the benefit of the listener, though, like the second part of Mitchell's solution is you're doing an LD preload.
Yes.
Right. So the first part is you have a bash script which pins each folding process to one core, and the second part is you do an LD preload. So you actually hook the schedule yield call that gets called a million times at folding at home because I guess it's trying to be polite or something because it has all these like run as a background process modes. But since you have one process per core, you can just kind of short circuit that. And what kind of performance gains did you see from doing that?
Enough. I mean, it's just like you look at the 10-day moving average compared to what it is after you put all these things in, and it's like it's significant. Like I'm just looking, we were averaging around 1.3, 1.4 million points per day, to now like easily over 2 million points a day.
Wow.
What's our last one? Yeah, 2315 points a day. Hey, a new record for us.
Wow.
So yeah, 2,315,911 folding at home points on the date of May 14th, 2020.
Not bad.
Yeah, that's a huge performance increase.
Right.
So if you have a dedicated folding machine, you should probably try these scripts out.
One last fun trick, and I'm still not done on this point yet, is if you actually run the Linux perf tools on the different folding cores, you can see that there's a non-trivial amount of time spent in x86 RAX indirect thunk, which is a kernel mitigation for Spectre. If you set a kernel boot argument to mitigations equals off, it just sort of, there's a macro that turns into a no-op, and then you get all that 5% back.
And then folding at home, Spectre is everything.
Oh, well, I mean, they've already got me pegged. It's like it's running as a high enough process where I could probably figure out how to get rid of it wanted.
Yeah, and you're also running remote code. Yeah, I mean, like that's
good. No, it's like I've already given up at that point. It's like I'm giving up my threat model for the sake of the Corona.
But you've spent more time than they did trying to dedicate your whole processor to this, like running whatever they send to you already, right? So why would they need to root you?
Yeah. If they were if they were doing this, they would be doing little, like, if anything malicious, probably like little Monero or whining on the side or something. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And
couldn't they just send you those work units and like just you'd never know? No.
Yeah, they could.
Anyway,
I'm wondering if that would actually work out.
Anyway, folding at home. There's a reason why the overclockers in the community, I'm sure, have taken a liking to this this specific cause. I don't know. I think it's cool to see the different simulations, like we said in the last episode. or one of the last episodes. Anyway,
Yeah,
Holding Home,
super
it's
cool.
fun.
So we will we'll link to your script, and I guess look forward to the blog write-up. I also love that the kernel argument is just mitigations equals off, and it turns off all the Spectre stuff. It doesn't. It's not like qualified mitigations. It's just mitigations. Like, turn them all off.
That's how big of a fucking change, I don't know, for the kernel it was.
Does it end up
also, I will be trying to go to pre-Spectre microcode, and I will update people with the results of what that does.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if it also goes back to the fallback microcode or something.
No, so there's still the new microcode, which is I have the latest BIOS, and which means the latest microcode, and I'm sure the latest microcode in UEFI or whatever. I can probably figure out how to downgrade it, but
Linux can load its own microcode.
Yeah, no, so I can get it to work. I'm just saying that I will let everyone know what the results of pre-Spectre microcode looks like compared to where we were. Because I'm pinning cores, so it's like I know what everything's read capability is at this point. So it doesn't even matter, even if you assume the worst. I'm fucked either way.
If you have some code, Mitchell will run it, apparently. As long as it's to help COVID.
Well. And on that cheery note, I guess we'll go to Max's side project.
So mine is less impressive. I'm just making a rock band guitar into a musical instrument.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds really nice in the headphones.
That sounds pretty good. So since this is an audio only format, I should probably try to describe what I'm seeing.
Basically, it's just so the upper frets are encoding what
is that a
chord progression you're in? Like so
this, just to be clear, this is the Rock Band controller, not the Guitar Hero controller. So it's the one where
Yeah, so it's a rock band controller. So it looks like a guitar, but it doesn't have strings, and all of the frets are like buttons.
Yeah, it's like a Fender with like a black body and like a white sort of like plate.
Very cool.
The basic Stratocaster that everyone had in the 90s. But it's like so it's got 5 buttons up top, 5 buttons down towards the
the very bottom of the neck.
The pick, towards the body. It's got a pick, like a switch that basically is standard for the pick, whammy bar, a little tone knob, which I actually use to control the scale that you're in. So you can do major, minor. There's like 3 minor scales, I guess. And then I haven't added the Hungarian scale yet, but I will add it.
So what did you do to this poor Rock Band controller?
Yeah, so there's just an Arduino taped on the back of it. I was gonna like reverse engineer whatever controller was on there, but I don't have access to nitric acid. I wanted to take a look at this chip on there. It's like weirdly epoxy coated. I could like spend some more time on that, but it's way
all right. So you have an Arduino. You have an Arduino. You got a Rock Band controller. Like, what else is going on?
So basically, so the upper 3 buttons control. It's just like a bit encoder for what is it, 1 through 7 for the Roman numeral progression of chords. So like every single pop song ever uses like 1 4 5 4, or like some combination of 1 4 and 5. And in a 4/4 and like in a 4 term beat. And so and then I have a button to make it go to a 9th chord, or no, a 7th chord, which just basically adds an extra note into that chord.
It's kind of bluesy.
Yeah, and then I have one to do augmented, which is fancy, and I can't describe what it is because I don't really understand it. But
and then it goes to some kind of synth, so you can like change the voices, right?
Yeah,
is that an Arduino?
It's just a full-on MIDI controller at this point. It's got it's got the USB portion of the Arduino changed to be a MIDI synth, or like to be MIDI serial to MIDI instrument. Like it's got the USB. The MIDI hid information.
Crazy.
And
so So
and
MIDI is play the one chord.
So this is just the 1,
and then go 4.
That's 4,
and then 5.
That's 4 major.
And what's the 7?
7th is.
Oh.
Yeah, it's there's some bugs on the 7th because it's.
Well, is that a bug or is that just the way it sounds? I don't know.
I don't know. It sounded funky,
right?
It could be it. Yeah.
It still is like sort of in tune. It just got some notes.
Right? No, it's like that's not necessarily wrong.
Oh no, it's not wrong because it's supposed to sound weird because it's a diminished chord or something.
So it's like an 80s music generator.
Yeah, and so it's like running through an arpeggiator right now. I don't have the hardware arpeggiator running because I haven't written that part yet. But yeah, and then the upper buttons are to so every chord has like the basic chord has 3 components. And so the first button is the first note. So that's the part where the 7th chord isn't working. And then that's the 7th.
So it gives you a way of doing kind of like solos.
Yeah, so you can like here, let me switch it to like one that's not an arpeggiator.
Yeah.
Fuck.
That's like that. The arpeggiator is cool, but that's not the full range of what the instrument can do.
Yeah.
So have you named this thing yet?
VGM Hero, because I'm gonna end up hooking it up to a synthesizer, a Sega Genesis synthesizer, so it'll be basically like Guitar Hero, but like video game music hero.
That's
Oh, I see. So without the arpeggiator, it just does one.
Yeah,
note.
it just does one note at a time. Not really good at this instrument yet, or this.
You're better than most, probably.
Oh no, it's all the fucking design of it is doing the work. Like I don't know how to do music, but I made an instrument that does the music for me.
Yeah. So basically, you can just pick a voice and then press a button and you're playing the root chord, and then press a button and you're playing the 4 chord, press a button, you're playing the 5 chord. And
basically,
then how do you change keys?
So you change keys with this little tone arm, which is like it's like a 5-way switch. So I have 4 of the ways. So this is majors.
Oh, so that's what you're using the switch for.
Yeah, it's a major chord, and then this is a minor.
Oh wow,
that's a different kind of minor. Doesn't really sound different at this. I think that one would sound.
Oh,
different.
Nice.
Oh, that's
I like
jazzy.
That.
Yeah. So it switches between like major.
Oh, keep going.
I feel like I'm in like a tower with a bunch of ghost type Pokemon.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's like a Nintendo game kind of vibe.
And this is going to go up to like a real Sega Genesis sound chip at some point, which sounds pretty cool too.
Yeah, that's the next stage after I finished the last tweak. So I was also that's not velocity sensitive right now. So I bought some Hall effect sensors to throw in because apparently what the Rock Band controller does, instead of using actual switches, because switches wear out really fast, they put in little like a magnet. So it's just a magnet that swings back and forth. And so right now it's just a couple of reed switches on either side.
This is on the pick.
And yeah, on the pick part. And so it's a reed switch, which just activates all on or all off. And so I'm just going to change that over to a Hall effect sensor, which hasn't like a voltage swing on it.
Well, you'd get more of like an analog signal as to how close the magnet was, right? Because it's like an EM field strength indicator.
Exactly. So you take the derivative of the strength, and then you have the speed, the velocity that it was.
That sounds like a really good idea. Like you'd probably get it really potentially sensitive that way.
Yeah. So like, you could just like sort of like barely strum, or then just like really fucking go crazy and it'll be louder.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's for all the buttons or just the pick button?
That's just the pick button. To make all the buttons force sensitive, I want to do that, but like I haven't even opened up the top part of it to see how that would work, but I'd probably need to put some sort of like velostat type layer in there.
That's super cool. Are you going to write this up anywhere, or are you just making this and showing it to people? And are you going to do like a TED talk with it or something?
I was planning on like maybe doing like a lightning talk over at a tour camp, but that's not happening this year. So I don't really know. I'll probably put it up on a blog post and see what happens. Yeah. Yeah,
cool.
It's a fun little project, and it somehow makes surprisingly good sounding music. Oh, the way
that thing worked out. I totally want to make one. Are those Rock Band controllers hard to find?
No, it's they're on eBay for about like $30 a piece. I mean, like they ship the controllers with every version of it, so it doesn't really. I think they're all basically the same design. You might have to tweak some things, but
I guess I'll have to go buy one now before we air this episode.
Because all of our viewers are gonna, all 30 of the viewers are gonna reach out and snag up all the eBay Rock Band controllers.
Hey, it could happen.
Yeah, no, it's all pretty straightforward Arduino code. Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Also building too. That's the other fun thing. That just involves ordering a bunch of crap off of eBay and Amazon.
Yeah, no, I love that thing. It's but I'm very happily gonna wait until you get it working and work out all the kinks.
Yeah, I'll probably post the blog post or something after I get a PCB design. I've got a PCB mill coming, so that'll just be something. So you don't actually have to use the Arduino portion of because Arduinos are like way more expensive than the actual chips, and it's all C-code anyways. So
you're actually going to do like a custom board?
Yeah, I figured might as well because I have.
Are you going to use like a off-the-shelf CPLD or FPGA?
No, I'm just going to use the Arduino. Because I already wrote the code in C.
Oh, I got it. What you're saying.
Yeah.
Never mind.
I was thinking about using a FPGA or CPLD, but I didn't have one that was cheap enough. I didn't have like an ICE40. Probably work on an ICE40. Anyway, that's enough of that.
Super cool. Well, I guess I have a side project of my own I could talk about.
Yeah.
So I am nearing release on my rewrite of the Backdoor Factory.
Yes, Return of the Backdoor Factory.
Yes,
the Return of the Backdoor Factory. I believe the title of the post is Back to the Backdoor Factory. But so back in about 2013, Josh Pitts at I think it was DerbyCon sort of released this tool, the Backdoor Factory, which was a bunch of Python code that worked with Ettercap. Ettercap would set up a man-in-the-middle attack on the network using like ARP spoofing to get in the middle of people's web downloads. And then there was all of this Python script that would act as a sort of a web proxy, intercept just downloads of files, and then inject appropriate shellcode out of a like shellcode directory of a sort of or a shellcode directory system that's sort of like sorted by architecture and target platform. It would like pick the appropriate shellcode, inject it into a file as it was being downloaded, after establishing man in the middle, right? So it was kind of a end-to-end solution for getting shellcode running on someone's machine. Now, the code was sort of like prototype level code. but a lot of people actually use this thing for a number of years, including me, because at the time, operating systems didn't like signature check binaries that much. People downloaded like installers that weren't signed and just ran them or like click through whatever. And you could Wi-Fi security was terrible, so it was pretty easy to get people to associate to a malicious access point. And if you got people to associate to a malicious access point, you didn't really have to fuck around with ARP spoofing, which is pretty loud and pretty unreliable. Well, so moment to moment it's unreliable, but it's like it definitely works.
50% of the time works every time.
It's just yeah, exactly. It's just that you have to continuously win a race, and sometimes you don't win that race. But most of the time you win the race. But it's like if you need it to be like constantly up and never fuck up on you, like it's kind of shaky. But being a malicious access point, if you get someone to associate to you because you say, "Hey, I'm ATT Wi-Fi" or whatever, because this was like 2014, guys. Yeah. I'm ATT Wi-Fi, and then people just associate with you, and then you could man in the middle of their downloads, inject whatever shellcode you want, have different shellcode for different targets, figure it all out on the fly. I thought this was great. So about a year and a half ago, I found myself in a situation where I needed to use something like Backdoor Factory again. It had been a while since I used it. Went to the site. There was like a end of life announcement. Various things sort of broke in it. Just really small things here and there. You had to like disable more stuff, like flip more bits in Windows files, or they wouldn't work on newer Windows, stuff like that. And that made me kind of sad. And so I was like, oh, my thing is like I write everything in Go now. So it's like if I want to use something, I like have to port it to Go. It's become like a weird personality trait, I guess. So I looked at it thinking, hey, maybe I can port this to Go. And it turned out to be a kind of involved thing that took me the last year and a half or so. I had a lot of help from people.
You weren't just adding the basic features of Backdoor Factory. You were adding like all sorts of things to that, like the zip thing and.
Well, yeah. So I actually didn't add that much. I didn't add that much. So almost all of this capability was in the original Backdoor Factory. But what I did do is I refactored everything. So I took all of this abstract functionality that the original code did, and I just sort of reorganized it into, cohesive modules that can be reused for different things. So an example of this is, and the really extreme thing I did is that, so he was using in the Python code, he was just using some like PE libraries they have in Python to manipulate PEs, but he was doing a lot. He was doing a lot of manual jump this many bytes and then write these bytes and then like write in the user data and then write some more bytes.
Well, so that's, I can see how you'd solve for that at some. Anyway, go ahead.
So because
that won't work with GCC compile,
because he had code to inject into ELF, inject into Mako, and inject into PE, and in some places he was using some libraries that I didn't have in Go, and in some places he was doing kind of this off-road thing. It was like whatever got the job done, I guess. So when I was writing this in Go, I didn't have the PE library even. So the one really extreme thing I did is I found this debug library in the Go standard libraries that had parsers for every binary format. It already had a parser for ELF. It already had a parser for PE. It already had a parser for Mako, and it parsed these executable files into abstract structures in Go, and then you could manipulate the data structures. But none of this code had any way of writing the files back out once you had changed them.
Makes sense.
So I got me and some of my friends, we wrote file generators. We forked this standard library and added file generators to all of the file formats so that you can load the file and then make changes to it in your code, like procedurally calling through this library rather than sort of byte banging the file format. And so that leaves like when you write code to inject some shell code into the entry point of a binary, you're making abstract calls to a library. You're not just talking about like, write these bytes here, and if you look at, so we made a separate library called binjection that actually has all of the injection logic, and it has just the injection logic in binjection. And then the debug library has the parsers and generators, and that's like separated out. And all of the stuff that handles the shellcode repository, we put in another library called shellcode. The idea there is, yeah. The idea there is it has behavior where it can use a shellcode library that's on the file system. But the plan is if everybody writes to use this interface, we can also implement a memory-backed backend for it down the line that will have the same interface but won't actually touch the file system, for example, because Go has really good virtual file system support built in.
Go's a really good language to choose for all that because they're going to have parsers for every different file format because they basically had to write their own for every
it's like you could do this in Rust, you could do this in C, but Go's a great choice.
Well, so and then the other thing we did is Ettercap is
I was about to ask. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Ettercap is kind of old and kind of difficult to use. It's like curses only. It's like curses and go fuck yourself. At least last I checked. I don't know, maybe there's a GUI for it that's nice. But it's, I don't know. It's got that old kind of like old style Kismet interface, where it just doesn't really care what you think about it on some level. So there's a kind of a new rewrite in Go of Ettercap called BetterCap, which is a cute name. So BetterCap actually has an extension script language called caplets that allow you to use an embedded JavaScript engine to write extension scripts for it. Now, BetterCap will set up an ARP spoof man in the middle, and it will set up DNS poisoning man in the middle, and it has the capability of having just extension modules to add new sorts of man in the middle things you can set up. But then it also gives you the whole framework, like it will intercept the web download for you and then call into your JavaScript as to how to handle it. So all we did was to make Backdoor Factory work.
Wait, I'm really stuck on this JavaScript thing. It's written in Go, which is also a scripting language.
No, it isn't.
Go, you can run Go binaries as a scripting language.
Not really. No, I mean, Go is always compiled.
Are you saying you use the V8 interpreter or?
No, they're probably using Auto. So here's the thing with Go. So Go is always like statically compiled. So if you want to add scripting to Go code, you basically slap one of these libraries on it that everybody uses. Okay. And that's the way you can add like a simple scripting interface without doing too much work yourself. So I haven't looked into BetterCap or how they implemented caplets, but I know that there is a JavaScript interpreter library for Go called Auto that I've seen a lot of people use. Yep. It's not going to do anything fancy. It's like probably not. Oh, we actually had some problems getting regular expressions to work. It handles regular expressions in an unreasonable way. We did figure out a workmorand, but anyway, I don't want to derail. But in order to get this working with BetterCap, so we made this library that parsed all binary formats and allowed us to make changes like adding things at the entry point and moving sections around and stuff, so we can implement different injection methods. Then we made a library that was a collection of injection methods. that called into the other library. Then we made a library to organize our shellcode. And then at the end of it, all we needed was a way to hook into the man-in-the-middle system. So the way we glued that together, BetterCap gives you the ability to just write using this embedded JavaScript interpreter. You can write these little script files that all you have to do is implement handlers for, like, oh, hey, we've intercepted a file download. Like, we called your callback. What do you want us to do? It's like mad easy. So we just made a hook in there. But the only thing that's exposed in this embedded JavaScript, they exposed only read file and write file as any way of talking to the outside world. So I had to make a named pipe server.
Okay, sure.
That worked on all platforms, like Windows and Linux, the same.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Well, that's
and wait, and all it does is it listens on the dry pipe, and then you cram the file you want injected into the pipe, and it just reads that out, runs it through binjection, which looks at the shellcode repo for an appropriate shellcode, and then like you can configure it with whatever injection methods you want, and it'll inject the shellcode in it, and then so you call write file on that pipe to send it the file to inject, and then you call read file on the wet pipe, and binjection sends you the injected file right back, right? So we have this like little stub JavaScript thing for BetterCap that basically just takes the intercepted download, sends it to over a named pipe to binjection, gets injected whatever way you configure, sends it back to whoever was trying to download it in the first place. Now, the final thing we did that's slightly, this is all stuff that the original BetterCap did back in the day. Not BetterCap, the original Backdoor Factory did all of this stuff back in the day, but we've replaced all of the individual components of it. We've broken it up in a way it can be maintained, and each one of these components operates a bit better than the old ones did. So we have support for more injection methods. It's easier to add your own injection methods, but also BetterCap works better than EtterCap, and there's more room to grow there.
I just think one of the things the
DNS
cache poisoning capabilities are kind of interesting.
Yeah, super cool, because the DNS is potentially more useful. There's also some DHCP stuff you can do with BetterCap.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you can, like, if you win the DHCP discovery race, then you just tell everybody what their gateway and DNS server is, and that's another way you can get in the middle of everything. So BetterCap is just like there's room to grow there. But the other thing we added that's something the original Backdoor Factory never did is I just added rudimentary archive support. So now not only if it detects you downloading an executable, it'll inject it. But if it detects someone downloading an archive, it will de-archive, look at every file inside to see if it's an executable, and if it finds an executable, we'll inject it with shellcode and then re-zip the thing and send it on.
Yep.
Now, I wouldn't expect that to work that well on very large files without creating a noticeable delay.
Right. It's not like quiet. Well, it depends on who's monitored, though.
Yeah, no, it could be.
It's anyway. Yeah, go ahead. We don't know. I'm not a bookkeeper.
Right? So we're not streaming because some you can stream like what is that? Tarball is a streaming gzip where you have to.
Sure, this is probably true.
Yeah,
we're not. The streaming code is not that efficient. We're probably just gonna have it set where it's like if your file's bigger than than 10 megs or something, we're not even gonna try.
Sure.
So, but viewers out there's room for improvement if you want to.
Oh, definite room for improvement. Well, one thing I definitely want to add that won't be done by the time we air this is CPIO support. So that we'll be able to.
You're gonna take me seriously when I said that.
Oh no, I looked into it, man. There's a Go CPIO library already, and so it'll be really easy to add support for RPM files. So we'll be able to unpack RPM files,
Right.
make changes, and repack them from as a man in the middle. So the other thing, we are getting into the business of sort of doing some post-processing on things to bypass signature checks. And it's not something you can do in a blanket way everywhere, but it's there's some tricks that work here and there. And this kind of gives us a place of building a central repository of storing all those kinds of tricks. But so we're going to be posting a blog post about the Backdoor Factory rewrite, and we'll definitely link to it in the notes. But you can check it out yourself. It's github.com/binject. It's capital BINJECT/Backdoor Factory. So it's binject/Backdoor Factory on GitHub, or probably just search Backdoor Factory on GitHub. Cool. Well,
Yeah,
so
that's
I guess we've all been keeping busy.
It's good that we have these projects to keep us as insane as we already were.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I work anymore. I've got 7 million bells, man.
But how many turnips?
Or
do you trade the turnips for the bells?
I sold my turnips high.
Yeah, no,
All
it's
right.
a weird time to be on the internet right now, but that's topic for another day. Well, not actually a topic for this day, a little bit.
So I've been avoiding the internet religiously.
I haven't, though.
Yes. So you have come today to bring tidings of the internet.
Because not that any of these things are important or that they matter in the grand scheme of things,
Security is an illusion. Everything is vulnerable, and nobody really cares.
Right. It's all built by humans, but there's just like there's a set of fun bugs that, everyone's kind of like, well, are we all fucked? Are we not? I don't know. It was like, it's very hard. There's a lot of information with a recent vulnerability related to Thunderbolt that came out. It's just like, there's a lot to process in terms of the threat model. And I've seen a bit of confusion about different aspects of the threat model that sort of make it hard to reason about all this, even if you're like trying. And so it's like, for my own sake, I have a decent amount of experience in the threat model, but like I wouldn't call myself like a qualified expert on this. And so for my own thinking, it'd be nice to just like, have some sort of like check on what has changed in the world, if anything, after this revelation.
Okay, I can give you a whole historical context around Thunderbolt.
Before we do that, just what is Thunderbolt? And so, like, a lot of people just view it as the port on the side of your computer.
Right.
Well, I want to build up to that, though.
All right.
Because basically, let's okay. So we're going to talk about DMA and Thunderbolt and what those things have in common. And I think that the way that I came to understand, and USB-C is in there, and Express Card is going to come up, and Card Bus is going to come up. No, I'm going to. We got to go. You know what? We're going to have to go through the whole thing. Oh, we lost Mitchell.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that, but go for it. I will.
No,
I'm here.
It's the only way it's going to make sense.
Firewire too. I got to mention
Firewire. Absolutely, we have to do Firewire. We just did the whole thing backwards.
This shit
here we go.
Goes all the way back.
I can do this really, really quick. So maybe not. I don't know. So back in the day, like the original PCI bus, I'm not going to talk about the ISA bus, but the original PCI bus, basically there was no control over who could initiate a DMA request at any time. So it's like any so a DMA, just to back up, and let's define our terms, I guess. DMA, direct memory access, is a hardware capability that is built into most computers that people are familiar with, that allows copying a region of memory it allows peripherals of the computer to bulk copy regions of memory, even into and out of the most sensitive memory regions of the computer potentially. Now,
before that,
now in the beginning, well, so in the beginning, right? PCI there were no restrictions on which regions of memory anyone could write to, and there were no restrictions on which peripherals could initiate the reading or writing of chunks of memory. So you had a situation where, and it was, I mean, even sort of worse than that, because they would also just load firmware off option ROMs on all of the peripherals, like PCI cards. They would just load the firmware at boot and run it at ring 0, and just hope for the best.
This is the era when Stack Overflows were everywhere and there was no protections on anything.
Yes. So this is like the first time I heard of DMA was on like an original Sound Blaster card, when they didn't have like configuration files preset for all the 3 sound cards that existed at the time. So they made you type in all of these like esoteric numeric values that like were the parameters of a sound card. Right, and one of them was like DMA channel 1, and it was always 1. I think there was only one DMA channel.
Well, if you had an awesome Sound Blaster, then it had 2 DMA channels.
I never saw that. Anyway, so the original PCI bus, it had no control, and people think this firmware security thing is a new thing. But in the mid 90s, there was actually an incident where there was a malicious Ethernet card that mirrored everyone's traffic to a foreign country. It, like any packet you sent, it sent another copy of that packet somewhere else.
Legit, and I didn't actually hear about that.
Oh yeah. This was a thing. Well, because those 3Com made those beefy network cards that had a big commodity flash on them to store the firmware, and it was enough. There was enough room in there to make and no one signed their firmware, of course. No. So basically, you could just make a modified firmware for those that did sort of whatever you wanted to, because that code was going to run at ring 0, and you had the arbitrary ability to copy whatever you wanted into any system memory that you wanted via DMA anyway, right? So it was like, the computer was super vulnerable to peripherals. Okay,
yeah, now I want to fast forward. It was loaded into the option ROM segment, I believe.
Yeah, and option ROMs are still there, but for the most part, they're ignored, or they have to be UEFI signed. It's a whole other thing now. I don't want to get into.
Yeah, UEFI goes. Yeah.
UEFI. Is it? Yeah. All you need to know about UEFI is that if someone says UEFI, you just roll your eyes and go, and then you'll be fine. It'll all be fine. I'll leave you alone. Okay, so so PCI, in order to sort of try and correct the problems with PCI, although this may have been done for other reasons, and with PCI Express, they wired the hardware up differently so that every peripheral, every channel for PCI Express is its own differential pair. So and they all go to a what?
I could talk on that a little bit too.
Well, the
reason behind that is so in the old PCI days, it was all running on a 33 megahertz bus, or like a 133 megahertz. I think you could upgrade, or no, 33 or 66 megahertz. And there's like a little bit in the configuration space that says whether or not this card is a 36 or 33 or 66 megahertz device. And so it was actually an entirely parallel connection that was transmitting bits back and forth. And then with the PCI Express, they introduced the transaction layer packets, the TLPs, that gets transmitted over those serial links.
Yeah, so I think PCI was sort of like more of a shared bus, and PCI Express, every peripheral gets its own copper pair, and some they get a copper pair per lane basically, and they can have a bunch of lanes, so they might even
16
have
now.
Many. Yeah, they can have like 16 pairs, just straight to them. But that means they do go to a central place, and that has given the modern computers the ability to have some control over who can master the bus and who can't. And so what bus mastering means is just the ability to initiate one of these direct memory transfers, basically.
Which before had to be on the AGP bus, which is why they designed the AGP bus in order to have that direct memory access capability.
Well, you could definitely do DMA from PCI cards before AGP was a thing, and also after. But I don't want to. AGP was kind of a weird dead end to nowhere.
Never mind. Ignore me.
It's like, whatever happened to AGP? Where is AGP now? Anyway, so the thing is, somewhere in here around AGP times, they were making laptops, and they needed the peripherals for laptops as well. So they made Card Bus, and which is better known, like the later version is better known as PCMCIA. So you might remember PCM. Well, I'm older than you guys, so maybe you don't remember PCMCIA.
I'm familiar with the acronym for sure.
But they looked kind of like credit cards, and you could get a network card that was a PCMCIA card. You could get a video adapter. You could
4G,
get
not 4G
Wi-Fi card. No, this was years before 4G.
Cellular.
4G. Used to add wireless support.
It would like maybe you could get it. You could get an EVDO card as a PCMCIA.
Or
I don't know.
EVDO.
EVDO.
It was mainly used for wireless cards. That was the
this is true. Yes, it was mostly 99.9% time wireless cards.
Well, or smart card readers, but
that too.
Anyway, so but there were these slots on the outside of laptops that you would slide these peripheral cards into, and because some of them were network cards or Wi-Fi cards, those are things that often make use of DMA because people want their network traffic to go fast. So or it could be like a sound card or a video card or who knows what. But how they implemented PCMCIA is they just routed, PCI out to an expansion card slot. So what PCMCIA is it's a physical connection. It's describing the form factor of the thing and the physical connection, but really you're just plugging in a PCI device.
Yeah,
fundamentally,
it has a slightly different configuration ROM. Or like a configuration bus address, but like that's
there's some like a little bit of extra interface stuff in front of it.
It's still compatible with the whole PCI protocol.
Yep. And then so now I want to fast forward a few years to the slightly newer laptops. Now this is only a couple years back. They had
it's like 10, 12 years back now.
Well, it started 10, 12 years back. It really started getting phased out like 2-3 years ago. But there was something called Express Card, right? And Express Card was the new way of adding peripherals to a laptop that needed to do more than what you can do on USB a little bit. They needed to be faster or who knows why, right? And again, it's like there were not as many Express Card devices. Like, honestly, there's more attack dongles made for Express Card than probably actual Express Card devices.
Because by the time Express Card came out, most laptops had wireless cards in them. That was the main use of PCMCIA.
How Express Card was actually implemented under the hood, it had all of the pins of USB wired to it, and it had all of the pins of PCI wired to it. And then it had one additional pin that was the toggle pin. So an Express Card,
PCI Express, right? It was PCIe.
PCI Express, Express Card. Duh.
So it's using the new TLPs.
Yep. So the Express Card was the PCI Express version of PCMCIA, which was Express Card except for PCI instead of PCI Express. Yeah, it all works out. All right.
And then also USB for some reason.
Well, no, yeah. So Express Card has all of USB and then all of PCI Express, and then one additional pin that's just used to toggle which one of those you are, right? So if you're Express Card peripherals had the option of either being a USB device or a PCI device. However, this still leaves the PCI Express exposed to the outside of the laptop, and that is a problem, because in this day and age, people expect disk encryption to work, and they, as in a previous age, they may have expected their actual laptop login to keep someone out. And if I can issue
4.5-ish, right? 2004, 5.
I don't know. I don't remember yesterday very well. So. But if I can issue DMA from the outside of a laptop, I can to get the operating system to do whatever I want. I can access an encrypted drive. I can bypass the OS login. I can do all kinds of stuff.
Locked, yeah.
And this is actually totally automated with tools you can find on GitHub. We're going to get back to that in a minute.
Yep. There's also FireWire as the next thing that came out with this. That was a big one because that affected all the Apple products.
So FireWire was another bus that went to the outside. It was mostly used for digital video cameras. I think it was actually a little bit older than Express Card even. So it was
we skipped over that part.
Yeah, you could get a PCMCIA FireWire adapter, as I recall. But FireWire also lets you do direct DMA and was often wired to the outside of laptops as a port.
It was used on, it was like that port that almost nobody used unless you're in video editing, on the side of every single Apple laptop that was made in that generation. And so again, the main use of that was the attack cards.
So so for FireWire, and there are well-developed attacks for all of these things. So there was like a DEF CON talk on the FireWire attack. There was a tool to do it from the outside. That was public. It was
called Goldfish.
Yeah, something like that. This was a long time ago now. This would be like, I don't know, 2004, 2005, something like that. So I'll have to look it up. But for Express Card, of course, the PCI leech tool just works on Express Card, and I've used this trick myself all the time. So and this comes up with this Thunderbolt attack too, because this also gets used for the Thunderbolt attack. But there's PCI leech is a PCI Express development board you can buy. Install this attacker firmware from GitHub. It's github.com/ufrisk for Ulf Frisk. It's UFRISK/PCI LEECH PCI leech. And there's instructions on what hardware it works on there. But he has fully automated bypassing a Windows login. So you can just literally run a script and it'll unlock a Windows machine, and some other, and you can also get it to pop a shell over DMA. But like, so you can like plug into an Express Card thing, stick it in the slot, and just pop a shell on something through DMA relay. Like, he has all of this already implemented, and so it just works out of the box.
I think his tool set was the most advanced that had come out at the time, which at least publicly, I mean, like this had been in use by various.
So this has been, this has been out for years now. Okay, so just to connect the last step there. So from Express Card to Thunderbolt. So in the last few years, Express Card got the same complaints that FireWire got, that the same complaints that PCI got, that I don't know if that anyone really cared in the PCMCIA days that I recall. FireWire is about when they started caring, but the cries that letting people do DMA from outside the case is probably a bad idea, we're getting stronger. And Express Card was very unpopular. I think just the form factor was clunky, and it didn't, with smaller laptops and everything, it didn't really work. So Intel came out with Thunderbolt, which is a proprietary Intel thing, right? So like, it's just Intel makes Thunderbolt chips, and that's
is
that
Intel
you have.
is it entirely, or was it in cooperation with like one?
I believe all Thunderbolt chips are licensed by Intel. I believe. Okay. You can check me on this, but this is important to the security model.
Because it was the next generation of FireWire, basically.
I just chimed to Joe Fitz about this a little bit, and you raised the good point. The specification is not readily available, and he talked about how he applied, and he's still waiting for his access or something like that.
No, and I can tell you exactly why that is. It has to do with the Thunderbolt threat model. So the reason I wanted to go over what the history was is because you can see at each step, from PCMCIA to FireWire, which was just a different plug, right, to Express Card, which was basically just a toggle with USB. Like, really, they've just been making very, very small physical changes over what is a thin wrapper directly to the PCI bus.
Yeah, they're basically just like DMA is a very fast way to access this.
And the desire with Thunderbolt was to just make that a little bit safer so people would stop complaining about it, but basically keep the same functionality for peripheral developers.
Well, so Intel had developed the IOMMU before, in that time between whatever the previous generation was before Thunderbolt external DMA access. So they came out with the IOMMU as part of the control scenario for Thunderbolt as well. So the IOMMU comes into this as well, and so does VTD. So the IOMMU, basically, because with PCI Express, as we said before, all lanes are routed to a central place that gives you an opportunity to enforce rules. And the IOMMU, a firewall. You can interpose everything that every peripheral wants to do, and you can enforce rules about which peripherals are allowed to do what. Yep. And that is what the IOMMU, that's what it is. It is the place at the center where you can enforce rules. However, the more rules you have, the more everything slows down. And because this is such a central place, it's very, very time sensitive. So it is sort of limited in that respect. And the other on boot, the IOMMU is cleared, so nothing is protected.
Yes. So
that's another important point.
There's actually been a history of problems with a race condition at boot configuring the IOMMU. So configuring the IOMMU takes like this struct that you like copy to some magic place in memory and then invoke a magic thing, and then you've configured the IOMMU. But up until very recently, no laptop manufacturers configured the IOMMU in DMA safe enclaves, which meant that if you were a peripheral able to issue DMA, you could win a race condition at boot, and this has been demonstrated. You could win a race condition at boot and actually stomp the IOMMU configuration, thus unlocking it for you even afterwards for more DMA. So the way the IOMMU configuration works, though, is fundamentally there's a simple toggle. You can say whether a particular PCI express port is allowed to bus master or not, whether or not they're allowed to initiate DMA. But the way that's usually implemented,
PCI function. That's the proper term.
Sure. That makes sense.
It took me a second to figure it out. I remember it.
It is not.
Sorry. Completely irrelevant. Sorry to derail.
No, that's right. So I actually I'm going to circle back around to that. So I'm going to wrap up the boot race condition thing. Sorry, I left that dangling. So there's been a race condition at boot that you can stomp the IOMMU config, and only Apple got that right. and now Microsoft on some of the new devices is also getting that right, where they're actually invoking an Intel signed authenticated code module to set up a DMA protected chunk of memory to actually put that IOMMU config structure in. So up until a couple of years ago, there have been, DMA problems even with the IOMMU configuration. But even now, once that stuff's starting to get sorted out, if you look at what the IOMMU config actually is, fundamentally, all you're doing is you're marking a port as internal or as external. Right?
The IOMMU, you're changing the mapping of it to, or limiting the mapping view and translating it. So it's like a TLB translation look aside.
Sure. But basically, you say this port is allowed to bus master, and this port isn't. But the way this actually breaks down is, if you're a laptop maker, you're setting all of your external ports to not be able to bus master, but internal ports you still can bus master. Right. So in this day and age, right now, the venerable PCI leech, which has a mini PCI Express adapter for, which I've been using this for like years and years, and it still works, right? If you can get under the keyboard of a laptop and swap out their Wi-Fi card in the mini Express port with the PCI leech, like you can do DMA.
Yep.
You're done right there. So and this is important when we talk about this Thunderbolt thing in a minute. I just want to point out that at any time right now, using a tool that's been available for, I don't know, like a decade, I'd have to look it up, right? Like you can, for the most part, bypass default BitLocker. Because it depends on the group policy settings for BitLocker, which PCR registers are being measured at boot. But if you're not measuring PCRs like 3 and 4, which I don't think it does by default, because honestly, it creates too many false positives. Those are the ones that measure the PCI, the devices on the PCI Express bus. So BitLocker by default, because it was creating too much noise, it doesn't look at the PCI devices anymore at all. So the
vast majority of hardware modifications are, in fact.
So people are like, how are you going to get under the keyboard and swap the mini PCI device while the laptop's still on? Well, first of all, that will work because PCI is hot plug. So like theoretically that would work, but if it's a BitLocker machine, you don't have to, because like you can do it while the thing's powered off. Then the thing will power on, and unless you have a pre-boot password set, which is not set by default, if you do not have a pre-boot password set in BitLocker, and if you're not measuring PCRs 3 and 4, you're not measuring the PCI devices. The default behavior is that it will measure its the boot block, and it'll measure the BIOS, and it'll decide that nothing's been modified and everything's fine, and it'll unlock the drive. It'll tell the TPM to unlock the drive, more or less, right? And then it'll warm up and just show you a login prompt. And what you can do at that point is you can connect with PCI Leech, and you can use the out of the box script to default to pop a shell. And you have a shell on a BitLocker encrypted drive. And the conversion then, right? So that this has been working with Express Card, for years.
And this is one.
And with the first version of Thunderbolt, they basically did exactly the same thing like FireWire. There was like no real additional security. They just had a port that you could connect to, and it went right to PCI, right? But the difference is both ends of the physical connection this time for Thunderbolt have to go through this Intel licensed chip. In fact, I think Intel makes them all.
Yeah,
right?
Secret sauce.
It's not an open standard, right?
Yeah.
And it's not but the reason it's not an open standard is baked into the kind of the security model. So I don't even remember if Thunderbolt 1 was on anything, right? Thunderbolt 2 was a little bit more common.
Thunderbolt 1 was on older Macintoshes. I remember that.
Yeah.
Trying to think. It's probably
that's right.
Weird.
So
probably
so the way the Mac the way the Mac Thunderbolt peripherals usually work is like all of their device IDs or their device ID group or whatever is just whitelisted in the laptop side in Thunderbolt. So it's like you can pay Apple to get registered as like an official device, and then your device will just work on Macs, right?
Yeah, and
so
and if you have enough capabilities, then you can clone those devices and then be automatically whitelisted.
So, but on anything else, those early Thunderbolt chips were on. They would be in the none security configuration, where basically they would accept a connection from any device. So here's the thing with the Intel, the Thunderbolt security, the sort of the threat model. The whole thing kind of boils down to device IDs.
Mm-hmm.
The Thunderbolt chip itself has like a secret ID and a secret handshake, Thunderbolt to Thunderbolt, and it's so fast it's hard to sniff, and it's not an open standard, and it's difficult to actually reverse the chip, and that's actually what's protecting that connection.
Yeah, the security through obscurity. Thanks again, Intel, because it worked so well for you every other time that you've been spanked in the past.
But fundamentally, because it's so closed, the way it's actually configured, and this is like a fundamental flaw, but there are different sort of security levels for Thunderbolt. I think there's 4 different ones in Thunderbolt 3. There's one which is like no security, where any device of any device ID of any family ID will be accepted, and they can just connect, and they can do as much DMA as the IMMU says is okay. Right now, that's like none. The other setting is it allows like display-port only or something like that.
So that's the thing about the USB-C DisplayPort or the USB-C thing that's everyone sort of considers as Thunderbolt now, is that it's actually so many different fucking protocols in one. So USB-C standard is just I think it's 4 LVDS pairs, 2 or 4 LVDS pairs, and then there's a USB 2.0 bus in there as well, which this is USB 2 all the time. And so those LVDS pairs can be negotiated to be, and then there's also some other like SPI link or something like that. And so those LVDS pairs can be negotiated as DisplayPort, Thunderbolt, or USB 3.0. And yeah, that's the basic summation of why that fucking is so complicated and annoying. Oh, it can also be configured as HDMI, and a million other things, but
yeah. So like Thunderbolt security level 2 or whatever is just DisplayPort, and then the 2 above that are the interesting ones. I'm not sure that's the official number either. I think they start at 0. So like none is 0.
Yeah, no, it's 0, 1, 2, and then 3 is the highest.
1 is DisplayPort only, and then the next one higher is the regular one, and this is kind of like the new one for Thunderbolt 3, which actually involves the operating system doing something. So fundamentally what happens is the operating system has to have some support for popping up dialogues that ask the user if they want to accept a connection from a new device. And this is like the new device ID or whatever, like, do you want to accept it? And then they have the opportunity of saying yes just once or yes forever. And then the system will remember that this is an accepted device ID and won't prompt the user next time. But what this means is because the Thunderbolt chip is so proprietary, this is like opening up to the operating system the opportunity of saying this device ID is acceptable and this device ID is acceptable and so on. And then the other thing is which security level you're in is a BIOS setting. So there is the potential of any attacker who can write to the BIOS of changing the Thunderbolt security level. There is also and that could come from the operating system. It could come from a direct SPI connection. And there's also the possibility of an attacker who can compromise the operating system, compromising the operating system in such a way that it just always says yes to Thunderbolt connection requests. However, you might ask, well, if you've compromised the kernel, why the hell do you care about Thunderbolt devices connecting in the future? And I would be hard pressed to answer that question. But one
of the other real problems with it too is that so it's like you're agreeing to whitelist something, and you're agreeing to whitelist it without, because you don't have the specifications, you don't have anything about it. You can't actually be guaranteed that you're connecting to the same device over and over again, because PCI device IDs are generally
this is the Thunderbolt ID.
Yeah,
it's not. It doesn't. You're not whitelisting the PCI device ID. You're whitelisting the unique ID in the Thunderbolt chip that only Intel makes.
Yeah,
so the whole thing is based on the whole thing is based on the ID in the chip.
Yeah, but it's still it's an ID. Like is a cryptographic negotiation that they're doing. I doubt that these are doing that, but
well, we know now. It's that's what the point of the paper.
Okay, well, Mitchell, will you explain the paper?
Well, yeah. Well, no. Hang on a sec. So the last level of Thunderbolt security is similar to the one that just prompts you, but then it sort of establishes a key pair of some kind, or it like pushes a random number over or something like that. But I don't think anything's actually even trying to use that yet, at least not that I've heard of. So there's been a progression with Thunderbolt too. Thunderbolt has been attacked by all of these tools, including PCI Leech, consistently. But so what is this?
Made a Thunderbolt 2. Sorry. One of my favorite Taiwanese random adapters websites, B+, who I believe also made the USB 3 to PCI adapter that was used in by Elf Frisk for PCI Leech for the first generation of it. They had a Thunderbolt version of PCI Express to Thunderbolt adapter on their site for a very small period of time before Intel managed to get to them in Taiwan.
No, I got one of those.
Oh, you ended up getting one of those? Nice.
Yeah, I've had one this whole time.
Nice. Yeah, they took them off the website because I think Intel ended up getting to them.
Should I not admit to having one?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's basically what it is. It's a legit Thunderbolt chip that they bought, and then they made an adapter to an Express card, and then I have an Express card adapter to Mini PCI Express. So I have my Mini PCI Express PCI Leech board that I clip into the Express card adapter. So first of all, you can just use it as a Mini PCI card. If you could like get onto the keyboard, just stick it in there, you're good. Or you put it in the Express card adapter, you stick it in an Express card, or then you can stick it in this, I guess, weird, shady Taiwanese Thunderbolt adapter, and then you're doing Thunderbolt.
Yep.
But
bplus.com.tw, not sponsored, just really like that site.
Pretty good. So Mitchell, you sent me this link earlier. Why don't you tell us about like whatever? So that sort of explains the progression from just running naked PCI DMA connections to the outside of laptop cases over the years, and why for some reason laptop makers won't. I mean, at this point, people are asking, why is DMA even still a thing? Why are we letting peripherals have unfettered access to system memory? There's this IOMMU thing, and they're also the other thing that people have tried now too is requiring DMA remapping. So like peripherals like have to.
So that would be forcing something to go through the IOMMU, or no?
No, it's basically like forcing peripherals to convert all of their DMA calls to position independent calls, more or less. It's almost like converting from statically compiled code to position independent code, except with just DMA addressing. So basically, they would have to do these. I don't think it requires much of a change, but it's I think there's like a some kind of like a protocol change in there or something. So old devices won't be able to support it. But this kind of comes up with Microsoft sort of I got to put this in air quotes, kernel DMA solution to Thunderbolt. But I think I'm going to save my shade on that for after we talk about this.
Okay, so basically there was a paper that was released. It was given a name. I can't remember the name. I'm blanking on it. And it's probably fine that I don't remember the name.
All future and past Thunderbolt security named bugs shall now be known as Thunderballs. So it is decreed.
Okay.
I was quite sad that they didn't pick a Thunderstruck. I thought that would have been a good name.
Oh, it's already been taken. That was the good one.
What was Thunderstruck?
That was like the first. That was one of the earlier ones on Thunderbolt.
Okay, so whatever this was,
that was like a couple years ago.
Not that.
Okay.
It was a paper.
I think it might have been Thunderstrike. But
anyway, it was released recently. It was a paper. It was a research paper on a few disparate, different Thunderbolt attacks. Some of them involved basically rewriting spy flash chips on the motherboard.
That would be just rewriting the BIOS setting itself.
I mean, there were just.
I watched the video. I watched that guy's video. All he does. So this is like a security paper that came out of a university in the Netherlands, and he released a 5-minute video where it's like they gave this bug a name and everything, and what he does is he opens the computer up, connects a BIOS programmer to the BIOS, and like rewrites the BIOS to change the Thunderbolt security level from one that asks the user for confirmation to 0 or none, and then he puts the computer back together, and then he can like plugs a PCI leech in with the Thunderbolt dongle. He even uses PCI leech in the video, and then uses that DMA attack that comes with out of the box with PCI leech I was talking about earlier, and I'm like, the only thing that's actually new in this video is that like maybe people didn't know how Thunderbolt worked, right? Like they keep the security setting in the BIOS. You know, where else are they supposed to put it?
The other thing is that like there is that like people or Intel like had that level of guarantee. They promised something with the Thunderbolt 3 spec.
No, but just on a basic threat modeling thing, right? In CVSS, in the threat modeling standard, if it requires physical access, your CVSS score drops like the stock market every other day. You know, like if physical access is like such a high bar, and my point is, if I have physical control of your laptop to the point that I can take it apart and rewrite your BIOS, why the fuck do I care about your Thunderbolt settings? I get everything I want right there forever without ever revisiting you.
Yeah.
And this is why like I am always suspicious of every research paper that has evil maid in it. Like the first evil maid paper was valid almost, and that was like a 2-touch attack against disk encryption. Full disk encryption at the time was actually something you might have to go do. In this day and age, it's not. I mean, there's so many peripheral firmware things. Like there's so much like
the only reason Ulf's work was novel was because he released a tool and a methodology, not because the attack was particularly new. He didn't.
Which is what I would say.
Those attacks go back to the mid '90s.
Yeah, he wasn't
at least
like that was.
Yeah, no, that's why I started with the in the beginning PCI stuff, because that was like 1995, 96 is the earliest like DMA attacks I heard of. And I mean, maybe it was like a one-off, or it's like a totally random thing. You know, it's certainly certainly weren't DEF CON talks at the time.
I feel like PCI 1.0 didn't have DMA. But I thought that you had to request specifically, but I could be easily wrong.
Oh hell, I don't know.
Anyway, so we have the fact that
well, Evil Made, right?
Yeah.
So all these things come out. Oh, Evil Made, and that a lot of times that's a way of sprucing up an attack which is impractical because it's harder than a common alternative. And this is one of those times. If you have the damn case open, why don't you just plug in the freaking mini PCI and do your DMA right then and there? Why you gotta put the thing back together and like go back through the Thunderbolt chip? It's just proving a point, but the point is, like, the Thunderbolt the threat model they're operating under assumes that if somebody gets physical access to the laptop, they're going to have an easier way to win, which is true. There's nothing wrong with the Thunderbolt threat model based on this attack.
If it's drive-by, that's the part that's sort of the worst part about it, because like you leave your computer unattended for a small period of time, then your system can be attacked easily. Like,
this is drive-by only after you've taken their computer apart and put it back together. Then it becomes a drive-by attack.
The fact that what about the independent attacks? Maybe not in the video.
Curdles my blood.
What about the attacks not in the video necessarily? I didn't see the video that discussed the non-cryptographic pairing between an actual controller and the ID of the controller.
Oh no, that's totally valid. And but again, this is like the thing is like Thunderbolt's not great because you buy this closed proprietary chip from Intel, and then you basically get like an easy to use developer interface on the other side to talk to. So anybody who gets legit Thunderbolt chips that are whitelisted somehow in the laptop can just do DMA from the outside, and some machines still ship, with what in accept all connections. Although the real solution to this is that future versions of Thunderbolt are going to remove security level 0. They're actually going to require one of the higher security levels. So that's what's going to make this go away. But it's not going away on this generation of hardware at all.
You also need line level encryption as well, like an actual.
Well, yeah, they don't have that.
Well,
like a cryptographic authentication, and
I mean, is that really not something you can man in the middle and just spoof? Anyway, go ahead.
If you have cryptographic here's the thing: and authorization,
they're keeping the security setting in the BIOS.
Right.
It's not secure from physical access. It just isn't.
Well, yeah. Why is it not the defaulting to the highest level of security possible? Like the defaults need to be the most secure.
Well, no, but even if I'm just saying, it's like where. So if you're making this like peripheral PHY chip, right, that's handing the physical connection to like from the computer to a peripheral, and you're Intel and you have this janky device ID whitelisting scheme that requires popping up dialogues to the user, at least in Windows, but Mac has this like app developer program or peripheral developer program where you just pay them some money and then you get whitelisted, right? Yeah. So like that is the model, and it's like, if you read their documentation, they tell you that this is the model, right? Because like it's better than having nothing at all, which was the very recent alternative, isn't it?
I mean,
sure. Yeah.
So like a pairing. Not to say that Bluetooth doesn't have, like. I just want to like just go on about how fucking terrible Thunderbolt is for not even trying to implement a proper authentication system and not you can't what you can't do, and like nothing does end-to-end encryption when it goes out into the hardware,
like the people don't have encrypted connections on their boards very often.
The thing is that
maybe in the future, but not today.
But that's the thing, is that it's an external device, and I mean, sure, you could go into a peripheral and modify the peripheral, but if each individual chip produced had a unique key of some sort, and then the actual transactions were all encrypted, then this
Well,
would be...
wait. Well, which transactions are encrypted? Because this is the part that breaks.
The entire communication of...
I feel like there's limits you'd run into on like control parts of the protocol.
And the problem
they're fabbing custom ASICs in order to support this fucking protocol. They could add a couple of operations. It takes 6 operations to perform an AES.
So here's an attack that would work, right? That I know just because I looked at Thunderbolt. You get a Thunderbolt peripheral that is whitelisted already, and you pop its firmware, overwrite its firmware, make it do whatever you want, and then just talk through the same Thunderbolt chip that was already whitelisted.
But then if every single device had a unique encryption key, then sure, you do have...
Can I name that bug? Because I read the Thunderbolt marketing documentation briefly, and I was like, oh, there's limitations to what their system can do because of reality, right? So if I just comment on that, then I get to name a bug, right? Thunderballs.
Thunderfuck? Thunderfucked?
No, it's Thunderballs. Yeah. No,
Thunderballs. I feel like it's different enough that UA won't sue me. But they're probably, honestly, I think they're litigious, and this was a bad idea. I regret my recent decisions.
Anyway, so we have that.
No one start humming the theme song. We'll really be in trouble.
We have that the Thunderbolt threat model, for many different ways, may have allowed for some direct memory access that may have allowed for some sort of escalations. Now, what is VTD, and how does it relate to the IOMMU?
Virtualization technology for directed IO.
So VTD is when I was talking earlier about those race conditions at boot, to configure the IOMMU to allow you to disable bus mastering. Like, the way you do that is by configuring VTD, which is the virtualization technology devices. Because Intel
virtualization technology for directed IO.
Oh, directed IO. I'm sorry. So the way Intel named all of their virtualization technology acronyms is like VT dash something.
Yeah.
Oh, it's confusing as hell.
Except for the graphics virtualization one, which is well, they do have VT-G, but then it's also like a GFX-V.
Oh yeah.
Well, I know VTX for their hypervisor extensions, but
yeah, so that's the CPU extension. Yeah.
So VTD.
Yeah. So, but do you want to take that one, Max?
Sure. Yeah. So it's VTD is the basically the technology that creates the IOMMU that allows remapping of devices, or basically basically changes the lens of memory that the devices view the system memory as. So like basically you can set it to a smaller area that's essentially only a virtual machine, which is the most common use case. You can also set it just to a smaller area that's just like a very limited area where it can just has enough room for the base address register allocated memory and some basic like what DMA stuff the driver needs. So that's the other way that it can be configured. As far as I'm aware, the kernel doesn't actually support that. Although I do remember seeing patches where somebody was trying to enable that on a per device basis, but it's all manual work. Like there's no like general DMA solution in the Linux kernel for doing that. Which sort of sucks because it would be really nice to be able to to enable that. But this might have changed. I mean, I looked at this like back in Linux 4 point something. So we're already at like 5 or 6 now.
So with these like the Thunderbolt bugs, this is probably a good place to segue to kernel DMA, because kernel DMA doesn't really have anything to do with DMA exactly, I don't think. But the so Microsoft's It sort of does, yeah. Mike, but it isn't a type of DMA, which is like, I don't know why they called it DMA. It sounds like a type of DMA implemented in the kernel, and that's absolutely not what it is.
No. So kernel DMA allocated memory is allocated from usually the lower 32 bits, which allows you to allocate memory or to basically to address it from devices that are 32-bit. And then also it is contiguous because the kernel can reallocate pages at will, but and sort of like change the virtual memory mapping. But you want a physically contiguous section of memory for DMA access.
But kernel DMA is the confusingly named Microsoft response to the Thunderbolt vulnerabilities.
Oh, I was talking about the Linux kernel DMA.
No, and this is just proof of how confusing the name is.
Okay,
right?
Well, never mind.
Microsoft called a security mitigation, quote, kernel space DMA, end quote. And let me tell you what it is. Basically, it was their response to the Thunderbolt, like Thunderbolt devices can be vulnerable. If you have a Thunderbolt, chip, you can, or it's like if I take your laptop apart, I don't know. So the, what they did was they implemented a feature they named kernel DMA, and what it does is for Thunderbolt devices only, if you enable kernel DMA, it will just not allow any Thunderbolt devices to do bus mastering. But only Thunderbolt devices, not any other Express card, Mini Express card, PCI Express, Mini PCI Express, like none of those slots.
I have solutions better than no solution, I guess.
Yeah, and so but this is the beautiful part.
Are they using VTD for that?
I don't know how it's implemented. It's Windows. You'd have to probably reverse something for 3 months. I'll wait till someone else blogs about it. I'll be like, oh, that's how they did that. But I just read their MSDN page about kernel DMA. But this is the beautiful thing. This is the nightmare that MSDN it usually is, right? But on the kernel DMA page, it says the kernel DMA is just a mitigation for Thunderbolt based DMA attacks. It doesn't cover PCI, Mini PCI. It listed all the things I just listed off. If you want to see those covered, you got to go to the BitLocker security settings page down to the DMA section. So I click the link, I go to the BitLocker security page down to the DMA section, and the only thing there is a link back to kernel DMA. And it's literally the only thing in the BitLocker DMA mitigations is
MSDN hell.
Yeah, it's like for Thunderbolt
configuration options.
Yeah, for Thunderbolt, let me direct your attention to Flash Kernel. Flash Kernel is amazing for Thunderbolt, right? And it's like so the. They do. If you look at the BitLocker MSDN pages, they do warn you that if the PCR values are not set correctly, you're open to this and that. And they do have really good documentation on selecting the right PCR values. And they do, tell you that if you don't have a pre-boot password, you're going to be in a less secure state. So it's just that people don't like it when they have to go to the BitLocker recovery screen, and default settings are derived by a kind of genetic algorithm based on people freaking out and complaining. So it's like what the default settings have ended up being is this sort of kind of secure for it's good enough for anybody that doesn't know how to set their group policy. Right. So that's more or less what it is.
There is awesome CWE. So CWE is METR's common weakness enumeration. It basically lists a bunch of different vulnerability types. And so one of my favorites is I forget the actual number. It's like 660 or like close to 666. But it's insufficient psychological acceptance. Basically, the user security control is too fucking annoying.
I almost just spit take.
Yeah. Man. The security control is too fucking annoying to use. So the user disables it.
One more time.
The security control is too fucking annoying to use, so the user disables it.
What was the phrase?
Insufficient psychological acceptance.
Insufficient psychological acceptance.
Yep. It's just like that
should be the subtitle of Thunderballs. Thunderballs. Insufficient psychological acceptance.
Yeah. Well, that's true, because no one could accept that maybe the threat model that they had before was just something that was known to have been broken for a while, and these guys released tooling for it.
Well, let's be real. What this is, these people are just thirsty. You know, they want to publish bugs, and they know Wired is so also thirsty at this point, and just scrambling for whatever. I mean, it's a magazine, people.
Yeah, like, it's a physical print magazine.
Hold on, but the claim is that the reporter tried to do their due diligence, talk to Intel, talk to the researchers.
No, it's a vulnerability, sure.
Yeah, it is a bug.
The amount of press that it's gotten, and
yes,
oh man, the dude is leaning into it. Like I checked his Twitter profile, it's just like
and honestly, if you look into this specific university and these specific people at this specific university, you will find an assortment of thirsty behavior in the past.
It's the Netherlands. Is it Vu something?
Yeah. You're on the right track there. But basically, they're not Delft. They're never going to be Delft. Like, they should just give it up. I don't know. It's fine. I guess everybody's got to hustle, right? But like, this just is. I don't think it's valuable to necessarily just raise awareness. I don't think raising awareness really does that much good. I think that people get information overload, and it's more ethical to try and deliver concise, precise, useful information when we start freaking out about security bugs. I think this level of attention for a bug that is by design, let's be real. They designed for limited security guarantees, and the limited security guarantees is what they got, right? Yeah. And this is just someone read the manual and was like, oh well, there's a bug because it didn't, like, they can't cover it here. And then they made a YouTube video and named a bug and got a Wired journalist who I believe probably meant well, but didn't seem to have the technical background on what an old topic this is and sort of what the progression of events has been.
That's the part that's sort of missing. Like, on the one hand, like, I do want to see this fixed, this type of vulnerability. Like, it has been fucking almost 20 years that this type of vulnerability has existed.
Possibly more slightly.
I say it was
20 years is the year 2000, man.
I mean, I'm sure it existed on fucking Commodores, but that doesn't count. Like, drive-by Commodore fucking DMA access. There's easier ways to fucking get on that thing.
The PCI bus is older than the year 2000. I don't
PCI...
want to start asking what year you were born, but we're kind of headed in that direction, man.
Oh yeah, I guess. I'm not entirely sure that PCI bus was bidirectional.
So one question I had was talking about concisely delivering points.
So PCI X was the in-between one, and I know for a fact that was out in 2003 because the startup I worked for used that hardware, but that was not PCI and it was not PCIe. It was PCI X, which is one of those other confusing in-between things we skipped over earlier.
I think a lot of people think the G3 really had that, and like some HP and servers and things.
And AGP, honestly, I haven't thought about AGP in years.
Well, I would just saw like the 3DFX, like Voodoo 5 9000, the 32-way SLI over one AGP slot.
Those two separate videos by the same guy.
Those were so fun.
It was overclocking Voodoo. It's look for Voodoo 5 videos on YouTube. I swear it's not terrible. Anyways, I think that this is, so it's like, okay, technically it's a security vulnerability, but let's do a threat model on it, right? It's a two-touch attack that requires physical access.
So right there, you're in the 1 to 3 range in CVSS, which is like it's never going to be more than the low end of medium. You know, this is nowhere near high. It's nowhere near critical. It's nowhere near a P0 for the most part. And practically speaking, today's computers, if you have physical access to them, they're not really defensible. There are disk encryption settings that you could if you have a pre-boot password set, you have secure boot set, everything right. You have
you eliminate the race conditions and like the IOMMU and like SMM, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no sleep bugs because there've been a lot of like bugs with going in and out of sleep because like when a laptop goes to sleep, all of the chips get put to sleep and they lose their security configuration.
Yeah, they just get turned off most of the time, or in a lot
of cases. So when you come out of sleep, they all have to get reconfigured, and there have been like weird race conditions with that. You can there's been some attacks on over the years, like S3 sleep attacks. Yeah. I mean, there's a huge body of stuff here.
There's so I think the thing is like this type of research is important, and it's important to correct it and like have people be aware of it. It's just I guess like sort of the media blitz is for this particular one seems so overblown compared to some of the shit that was released 5 years ago. And
the thing is like the reason this pisses me off, I don't blame people for being thirsty. Like everyone is going to hustle. I accept this. This is fine. Right? We are a mercantile species. In Star Trek, really, we're the Ferengi, I think. Like
that's true.
so like that's fine. Like that doesn't shatter, it doesn't shatter my worldview at all. But like what pisses me off about this is there are legit freakouts we should be having that we're not having. Like this is what Wired will write up and sell to whoever still reads Wired as something they should be concerned about. Right? But like there's things they probably should be concerned about they're not paying any attention to.
Yeah, it's too complex to explain. It's real easy to explain that somebody who has access to your computer for a small amount of time can bypass the encryption, and hackers can also turn your computer into a bomb.
Divide by zero, man. It's no joke. That's real.
So, I mean, I guess part of my next question is, we've talked a little about how maybe you could mitigate some of these attacks on the IOMMU. And one thing I thought that was interesting on the paper was that it was Mac OS for 5 of the vulnerabilities was listed as not vulnerable, and 2 of them only partially, while Linux was either yes or no on a bunch of them. And I just thought that was a very interesting and basically wrong, almost wrong, not quite wrong, but just sort of almost misleading access to dichotomize on. Because you can do anything in Mac, you can do in Windows or Linux, excuse me.
Well, but it comes down to common configurations, probably. Right. So the thing, the advantage that Mac has with measured boot and secure boot, and Microsoft does too with the Surface line, is that they totally control the hardware. It's a homogeneous hardware ecosystem, and they can have much more aggressive secure boot settings because of that. And then the other thing that probably factors into this is that on top of that, Mac and now Microsoft, I've been told. I just read that on the internet earlier today, but I'm told that both Apple and Microsoft are now setting up their IOMMUs in like DMA protected enclaves and being more careful about the handoff from secure boot to the operating system against DMA attacks. So this is it's an attack surface that it's an attack surface that's slowly being hardened, but there is an advantage in homogeneous ecosystems, at least when it comes to measured boot, because in Apple's case, they know like the Thunderbolt like group basically of every peripheral they're ever going to allow to connect to them, essentially. Right. And that kind of like limits some things. And then they actually tried to lock down the the bootstrapping of their operating system to be hardened against DMA attacks to some extent, and Microsoft has followed suit. So and other laptop makers might do that as well. But the problem you have doing that with Linux is you have to set all of this up yourself.
Right.
Distros don't really give this to you out of the box.
I'm curious how Cubes fared on that, because Cubes is probably one of the few operating systems.
So they've done some stuff with TXT in the past, and like doing some loading in Enclave. I'm not an expert there. I know that they've done a lot of research into trying to utilize some of the platform features.
Yeah,
DRTM is a whole other topic for another day.
Which I just actually watched Advancing Windows Security by Dave Weston at the Platform Security Conference. And it sounded like that was something that they are working toward with the Windows project.
I wonder if I should take a look at that. Are the slides online?
It's not just the slides, the whole talk.
That's all I want. No, that's all I want to know is if the slides are online.
Well, you can get them in a form that you can.
All right,
read.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, they're actually doing something a little extra. Because there have been enough SMI handler attacks, which Max or Ben, you guys might know that the system management boundary is not necessarily a hardened and unporous boundary.
Yeah. There's been published SMI attacks previously, and some unpublished ones.
So DMA can definitely come in useful when attacking SMM also. It's worth mentioning.
But there's actually it's a huge attack surface to come from there, because you can not only trigger general faults, which you can generate non-maskable interrupts, which will cause the CPU to jump back to the system management mode protected execution. And you also have the ability to write arbitrary memory. So
except unless one new feature that apparently Microsoft has been pushing on their silicon partners to build in is a way for you to have an SMM page table that you can mark as read-only after the first stages of boot. And if you
carry on.
That's nice. I mean, like you could put.
So you basically what they do is they map it to only be able to read and write NB RAM, and then the rest of the physical RAM is just
not the only thing that the system management mode stuff is writing. It's there. Like,
so I'm not an expert on what the page tables actually get deployed in practice, but apparently there is a
separate.
This is a new. There is a new set of page tables that is coming out in newer chips and boards.
So if you Google the Intel STM reference implementation, you will find Intel's prototype implementation of, I think it's the synchronous transfer mode or monitor, synchronous transfer monitor, which is a SMI interposer for so it's a firewall for SMM actions that there has been support for in TXT for 10 years already. And there's like a whole way of setting it up through TXT. And it's
I think they're getting rid of they got rid of TXT though, because it was found to be vulnerable in like every other way.
Well, it might have been replaced with SGX or something. I don't know.
SGX is also. Yeah.
God damn it, Intel.
Well, and it's everyone's going to be when they look at Mitchell's like optimization script, everyone's going to turn Spectre mitigations back off anyway, right? So YOLO, I guess. Run his route. Fuck it.
I gotta.
What do you want to die pretty? By
the way,
what?
I gotta run in like 7 minutes. I got a meeting.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think we're kind of winding down anyway. So does that answer your DMA questions there?
Yeah. So Twitter? I mean, I just had a few last thoughts on some of the reactions that we had. People were talking about like how, oh my God, we shouldn't expose the DMA exposed port through the outside of the case, and I was like,
true.
Yeah. Here we are. But there were some reactions saying if you use the IOMMU, then it shouldn't matter.
Well,
no. There's a lot of other things that you can do with DMA.
So if they do use the IOMMU, let's think that through. All right. So we have all the tools in the shed now to work this one out. So if the IOMMU is correctly configured, they connect their device to the Thunderbolt port on the outside, and it does not allow them to do bus mastering.
Essentially.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's part of why there was no impact for
disabling
macOS, I believe.
would definitely be an improvement.
But if you were willing to open up the laptop in this attack to get bus mastering to work,
right?
If you open up the laptop, even with the IOMMU configured, you open up the laptop, you plug your PCI leech in where the Wi-Fi card was, in the mini PCI Express slot, and then you do your DMA from there.
Exactly.
It's a drive-by attack scenario. And
Bob's your uncle. So you've just lost the ability to reassemble the case and then plug something back into the external port. That's what this attack is giving you.
Exactly.
It's giving you the ability to do 2 touches instead of 1.
So with
clearly that's something someone would really do in real life, right? That's a realistic attack that someone would choose to do 2 things instead of 1 thing using the same PCI leech, by the way.
The more advanced attack is to spoof one of the devices that's already authorized for the system.
I like my attack better, where you just get a valid whitelisted Thunderbolt ID device, and you dump its firmware, and you just find a bug or replace the firmware, and then
spoof it in whatever way is the easiest. But
and then see this, you could actually get a made to do. By the way, you could get a made to steal a Thunderbolt peripheral for you for money. And then you could just take it away and do your firmware, modifications. And then you could just pay the maid to put it back. And people aren't going to notice a peripheral missing necessarily, or they'll think they'll misplaced it, or they'll think the maid just moved it because, right? This was the whole premise of the evil maid in the first place. Yeah, but what you can't get a maid to do is take a freaking laptop apart and connect a BIOS programming cable to the SPI flash. And it's if they could do that, they're probably not gonna be a maid.
This is also not even touching on the fact
they'll be working for a boutique security consultancy.
You can have an entirely normal device that's connecting via USB or any other peripheral that you can just plug in, that just exploits a vulnerability in the drivers themselves too. That's the other thing. So there's a million, you plug in a USB network card and exploit something in the networking stack. There's a million different ways to gain access to a running system via that route too.
Right, and so that's why you'd have the IOMMU sort of be able to be smart enough to map only certain ranges that each port can access. So you sort of limit the scope of that.
But there's still driver issues at that point.
Right. This is true. But
and actually, what Microsoft did with the kernel DMA thing, where basically they just require when you enable this feature, it limits DMA to just DMA that allows it to be remapped, right? And that's a pretty good way forward. I think, all things considered. It's just that fix is limited only to Thunderbolt, and is given a horrendous name, worst of all time name for a project. Somebody's naming powers need to be removed from them, and they need to be replaced with the Dilbert project name generator or something, because literally anything is better. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be it for us and our special rant on DMA, and general focusing of vitriol towards Twitter cryptographers and so on. Actual cryptographers who probably don't use Twitter.
RS or A?
Oh yeah, that was my whenever someone tries to like big time me about what a cryptographer they are, my utility joke at this point is I go, "Oh, are you R, S, or A?" And then I just watch them die inside in their eyes a little bit, which is sort of entertaining. But anyway, so that's it from us at Hack the Planet. And remember, hacking is not just a crime; it's a survival trait. The problem with doing a podcast where your target demographic are really, really hardcore introverts is that you think it'll be fun to set up a call-in number. Like you could do, take calls from hackers, like you're doing a hacker talk radio show of sorts. But fundamentally, the premise is flawed. If you disagree, give us a call at the Hacker Helpline. Area code 206-486-6272. That's 206-486-NARC with a C. Or shoot us an email at podcast@symbolcrash.com. It can be an audio email, or since that seems to be going over like a lead balloon, you could write us an email as well, and we could have somebody read it off in their own voice, and then we could respond to it. At this point, I would take semaphores or a smoke signal.
RS-232.
We want to hear from you. 206-486-6272. Now I'm doing like an NPR pledge drive. We desperately crave your attention. Give us a call.
Phone lines are available.
Oh, thank you. That's the line. I always tune out the pledge drive after the first 3 seconds, so I was losing my ability to do this bit.